The struggle for balance between style and substance is possibly the hardest balance for any game to find. You want to make sure that your game is distinct in case you lose track of it while shopping at Walmart, but you also want to make it interesting to make sure you care enough to report it missing. There are games that have amazing visual styles and super cool graphics that play like garbage, and the inverse, games that could potentially be a life-changing experience that open up a whole new genre of games for me to enjoy. Not dressed like that, they're not. I know I said I liked wrestling, but I like my parents' approval a lot more. A far less common example is when one of those two elements is so overwhelming that it manages to work completely independent of the element it's missing. It's very common for a mechanically complex game to be super light on visuals, and for a visually stunning game to have all the control complexity of a light switch. Speak for yourself, loser! I just figured out how to wave dash with this thing! Even though a game can falter in one area, that doesn't mean that another can't work hard enough to pick up the slack, and that's exactly what happened with me and Gungrave. So what is Gungrave? Well, we can't really answer that question properly until we get into the game's development. Alright, where is Gungrave? On the PS2. When is Gungrave? Later. How is Gungrave? It's pretty good. Why is Gungrave? Oh, I know this one! One of the biggest driving forces behind Gungrave's development was famous Japanese manga artist Yoshihiro Naito. You may know him for his work on Trigun, a story following Valentinez, Ankelanella, Z-Hawk, Shushisha Boherets, Gambe Gobella, Blue Stratovalle, Talon Trent, Pierre, Andre Charton, Hamos, Ivanovinci, Baldus, George Deutzel, Kaiser III. Friends call him Vash. It's a massively popular series, running for 20 years in manga form, outliving the very book it was first published in, and being adapted into one of the most warmly regarded animes of all time. Above all else, though, was Naito's style. The man's artistic talent is amazing, and the thought had come up to try to apply that talent to a video game. So, how did Naito get into the game-making scene? Are you prepared for the giraffe to get introduced? Naito was attending a convention in California and bumped into producer Toru Kubo while the pair were shopping at Toys R Us. This game and bankruptcies are Jeffrey's lasting legacy. The pair eventually decided that it was time to bring Naito's style to the PS2, and from there, the development team was formed. This included Naito himself, developing character designs and concepts for the game, Kosuke Fujishima, most famous for the Oh My Goddess series, who designed all the mechanical elements, and Red Entertainment, developers of games like Sakura Wars and Fossil Fighters. Together, the team would tap into three very specific visions for what the game's world should look like, mixing Chinatown, John Woo, and Robert Rodriguez films, specifically Desperado. After having seen the film and playing the game, I think there's great grounds for a lawsuit. The game that came out of this union was Gungrave, released in July of 2002 in Japan and September of 2002 in America. The game received a critical shrugging, neither its supporters or its detractors able to muster up enough vitriol to definitively say whether it was good or not. Middle-of-the-road review scores and decent sales numbers are usually the death knell for a game, but no, Gungrave went on to have a decent run, getting its own amazing anime adaptation, a sequel, VR games made well after the last Gungrave fan died, and even a brand new installment as recently as last year. But I want to focus on the original. This is Gungrave. This game has an appendix of a plot. If you pass out mid-cutscene and wake up when the gameplay resumes, you won't really miss anything. That's not on accident either. Gungrave is very forward with what it wants to be, and a story-rich game is not that. If you do want to understand what's going on, go check out the Gungrave anime. It fills in every missing detail and is basically required reading, except for the fact that Gungrave the game kind of functions independent of having a story. What plot is there starts with a young girl dragging a massive metal container through the streets of a futuristic city, eventually making it to an underground office. This is good old Dr. T, and he's looking after the main character beyond the grave. The package the girl was carrying contained a pair of handguns that belonged to Grave. Dr. T asks if we're gonna go take out the Syndicate, a crime family that runs the town. Grave says nothing, he's a mute. And with that, the game begins. Don't mistake Gungrave's lack of story with the story it does have being uninteresting. You're given everything you need to know about why you want to blast the villain at the end of the stage into particles, but the game chooses to not bog itself down with long cutscenes. Gungrave's greatest strength is how to the point it is, and that's not only seen in the story, but also the gameplay. Don't worry, fellas, if you're on a date and they ask you how to control Gungrave for PS2, you can write down most of the controls on your hand with space to spare. Trust me. So the main button is the square button. button. You're gonna be jamming on this for the entire game. You have to continuously mash it without auto-fire, which can be painful, but you don't really have to worry about the game going on long enough for you to feel the effects. You also have a melee shot, which almost never comes up because if an enemy's running directly at you, you're gonna have a much better shot at gunning them down with your pistols rather than trying to hit them with your coffin. Triangle is your demolition shot, or as they were called earlier in development, desperado shots. Guys, I think you really liked Gremlins. This is your screen nuke. Fire off one and the whole place lights up. X is for jumping and circle is for running, a button you're gonna want to be holding down whenever you're not shooting because Grave is very, very slow. Now, if the name Beyond the Grave didn't tip you off, Grave is a zombie, so it makes sense that he can't run fast and the game never requires quick movement. Except when it does, but those parts are bad. These are your basic controls, but Grave, Beyond the does have a few more tricks. Under your health is a shield meter that eats damage for you and regenerates super quickly when out of a fight. The drawback is that if you're out in the open for too long and start taking real damage, that doesn't recover and adds up fast. Luckily, the shield takes a long time to break, so you're invincible as long as you kill whoever's shooting you fast enough. When I said the gameplay is straightforward, this is what I mean. The game encourages you to plant your rigor mortis riddled behind in place, stand still, and shoot. The shield takes most of the damage for you as you simply rotate around and take out whatever's bothering you. Grave shoots a lot faster and deals way more damage while standing still, so the game is fully endorsing you just standing there and blasting till the opponent is a cloud of viscera. To some, that may sound incredibly simple and a little boring, and while it's perfectly fine to feel that way, there's an aspect you're not accounting for. This is rad as hell. Gungrave's gameplay succeeds at minimal input, maximum output. The combat is so stylish while being incredibly simple. It's so much fun to shred people apart with bullets while tanking whatever they throw back, and then blowing them all to Kingdom Come with a well-timed demolition shot. On top of that, this style of gameplay works perfectly for the game's combo system. To charge up those demolition shots, you have to get enough beats to make your skeleton overlord happy, and you do that by shooting. Not just shooting people, but the environment too. One thing that all the ingredients in the Gungrave melting pot have in common is environmental destruction. John Woo, Robert Rodriguez, and Trigun especially pride themselves on having gunfire tear apart the scenery and leave nothing but rubble in the aftermath. Your combo gets pretty high when only firing at people, but balloons out of control when you start beefing with the furniture. By firing at all times, you get to keep your combo up, increase it, and get more demolition shots as a result. It looks to emulate the feeling of a chaotic shootout in every stage, and the game succeeds perfectly at that. Speaking of that stage, we have to chase a gangster down to get more information out of him about the Syndicate. We chase him all the way up to the roof of the building before he somehow gives us the slip and goes all the way back down to the streets below. Well, only one way down. Once we reduce the surrounding area to scrap metal and thug meat, we get to interrogate the guy for information. Interrogate means murder, right? After filling him with enough lead to legally qualify as a pencil, we leave and stage 1 is over. That took 4 minutes to complete. Yeah, you'll learn quick that Gungrave is a very, very fast game. Stages on average don't break the 10-minute mark, and for how simple the controls are, that's probably for the best. The game knows what it is, how much somebody can take before it gets old, and gets out well before that. By putting armed goons on the endangered species list, I managed to score a whopping 17 skulls! Wow! What the hell do I do with these? Back at Dr. T's place, and the girl who brought us our guns, Mika, is shaking off all that blood loss like a champ! These in-between mission breaks at the office are where the lore of the world gets expanded upon, learning that Grave has a very personal beef against the Syndicate and that Mika's mom was our old friend. She doesn't seem too keen on talking regardless of how hard I mash the X button, so I guess I'll leave her alone. The next place we're going to terrorize is a warehouse filled with seed addicts. Someone's been cutting their sunflower seeds with hard poppy, which sounds like the perfect excuse for us to get involved. Going through this place not only gives us a chance to test out the brand new demolition shot we got for clearing out the last mission, but also taking the game's level design, since it's never really gonna get more complicated than this. Gungrave's levels are almost all wide open hallways with enemies crawling out of the woodworks to fuel your combo meter. This works alongside the game's main playstyle perfectly, as instead of chasing enemies down to harass them with small arms fire, they come to you, leaving you free to simply stand there and keep firing until people stop showing up. It also means that rarely does anything take you by surprise. Enemies are kind enough to never flank you and instead run at you with all the enthusiasm of a rat hopping into a deep fryer. Now, I lavish the level design with praise, and what do I get in return? These boxes. Yeah, these things are a real pain. For as good as Graves' movement is at selling him as a Hot Topic Frankenstein, it doesn't really help out when it comes to platforming. Enemies up on top of the boxes are almost impossible to kill from the floor, and the odyssey you have to take to get on their level can leave you nearly dead. They understood that this section was kind of frustrating though, since they give you a big room full of boxes and goons to mow through afterwards. Damn, it feels good to be a corpse. The enemy variety in this stage also takes an uptick as you get enemies with machine guns, rocket launchers, dolts who thought it would be wise to run at you with a samurai sword, hacking a console with our guns, and we get into the office of the warehouse and find our target. We show off our one party trick for a while until everyone in the room dies, and we get 13 skulls this time. Alright guys, it's time to regroup, this was embarrassing. Back at the office and we get to chat more with Mika. Here we learn that Harry McDowell is the one after us, and is the head of the syndicate. Speaking of which, Mika here is the daughter of previous syndicate leader and previous living person, Big Daddy. Now that the city has calmed down thanks to people not smoking pumpkin seeds, there's more opportunities to tangle with the syndicate, starting in Chinatown. 30 double years in the future, we have flying cars, cowboy zombies, and super cartels, and somehow Chinatown is just persisted. Our informant, Winky Liveslong, tells us about a party to introduce the new boss of the syndicate, and if they're all gonna be there in one place, what better chance will we ever get to kill them all in one go? While I have the chance, it's time to finally mention that presentation. This game is dripping with 3 very distinct styles that all mesh together into something perfect. First off is the art of Naito. This game is loaded up on his trademarks. Characters with the proportions of fridges, massive, bulky guns, at least 5 or 6 crosses on any given part of the body with absolutely zero religious meaning, and massive, hulking trench coats. Then there was the way the style was adapted to the PlayStation 2. We gotta get those selfish, lazy indie devs out of the stone ages of SNES-inspired games and get them making games that look like this again. Stop living in the past, it's not 1992, it's 2002. The angular and blocky designs of Gungrave are endlessly charming, giving the game a look that could truly only be achieved by this team on this console. Then there's the music. Not exactly like Undead Cowboy and Future Chinatown lends itself to a specific music genre, but Gungrave manages to find the perfect mix of different music types, primarily focusing on jazz. This game has almost as much saxophone in it as it does bullets, and it's one of those things that on paper doesn't work, but in practice sounds perfect. Back to the streets, and we get the best chance to build up combos out of any stage so far, as we get wide open streets filled with cars and goons to gun through, enclosed shopping areas with stands to blow apart, and the first kinda problem with the controls. See, Graves' movement doesn't just control him, it controls the camera, which means it's impossible to know where something is without putting Grave directly in its face. With a stage like this with a healthy amount of corners, you can't see what's coming until you're already in the line of fire. And with Grave moving with all the grace of a hippopotamus, it makes dealing with enemies behind corners a real hassle. Later on, you get chased down by an excavator that wants to flatten you for all your crimes against vehicle kind, but the old reliable of shooting it repeatedly until it dies hasn't failed us yet and isn't failing us now. We crash the party the syndicate is having and end up in a room filled with fragile dining equipment. The janitor is gonna be pissed. You stand there and fire your guns long enough for the syndicate to come and see what all the noise is. You see, these men get to run the town because they're the widest. They inform us that we used to be part of the syndicate, but clearly an irreparable rift formed after they shot me repeatedly in the face. The widest of the syndicate, Bob Poundmax, then hops down for a fight. At least I'm not the only one with a stupid name. He seems to have mastered the same fighting style as us, as he refuses to move for the entire fight until we shoot him dead. On our way out to catch up with the fleeing syndicate members, however, he returns in a powered-up form, needing several helicopters to carry him around like a baby bouncer. He's got new attacks like hitting us with his belly, slamming you, and giving birth to these weird white guys, but other than that, he's not much trouble and we kill him for a second time. Sir, how many skulls did you get in that last stage? I don't want to talk about it. So before we can go out for our next mass homicide, Grave has to have a blood transfusion. See, he's a walking corpse. He needs to have all the blood sucked out of his body and replaced with new, fresh blood. Taking a break for the first time since starting a war with the concept of crime, our lab is immediately raided, Mika is kidnapped, and Dr. T is killed. We have to book it to go find Mika before they get away, and this involves more gunfire and and goons. Now, just because I think that Gungrave is cool as hell doesn't mean I can't understand why someone would mistake this for the most boring game ever made. It has been 4 levels, and not only is the gameplay not changed since level 1, there's almost no variety in how you approach things. All that really changed is where you're shooting, what the guys you're shooting look like, and what demolition shots you can use, and to some, that can get really, really old. If you like your games deep, engaging, and constantly challenging you, Gungrave is not that, not by a long shot. It's simple, pick up and play action without a lot of depth to help it out. Gungrave is a game of extremes. Depending on what you like out of a game, it's either going to be a 10 out of 10 or a 1 out of 10. If what you've seen so far looks fun to you, congratulations, the entire game is like that. If what you've seen so far doesn't look fun, sorry, the entire game is like that. Back on track though, and we managed to go deeper into the subway, plowing through enemies in bunny suits. Hey, it's their job to explain to their family why they're in a bunny suit at their funeral, not mine. These rocket launcher enemies are the worst because they fire a lot faster than you think they can, home in on you, and annihilate your shield meter. It takes us a while, but the level's name finally lives up to the hype as we get onto a subway train. I feel like this is what people see the whole game as if they don't like it. The rest of the level is running through train cars, shooting at helicopters riding along outside, and trying to position yourself to hit them without being hit. I feel like this is the game testing the water for just how much horizontal movement you really need to enjoy yourself. It's either forward or back. All other cardinal directions were a mistake. Yeah, I said it. Fuck you, East. Getting far enough and we meet up with the next Syndicate member who's holding Mika hostage. To make sure he maintains the advantage and keeps us on the back foot, he throws his only piece of leverage out of a moving train, squaring off with his mutated form, and the game is starting to lose me just a little bit. See, Bob was a fun boss fight since he hit hard, sure, but within reason. The boss felt built around how Grave moves and didn't expect too much. The tactic of motionless murder worked just fine with occasional dodges. This fight, however, the boss just won't stop moving. He's constantly dashing around the arena with a machine gun that hits you no matter what, and has an attack that, if not dodged, will whittle you down to almost no health. You can use the hitherto unnecessary lock-on to keep track of him, but with the camera control problems I mentioned before, finding the boss to lock onto him is easier said than done. It's also in this larger arena that you realize the pistol's range is a lot shorter than you initially thought. The boss can easily get out of range and hop back in just to stab you again. I mean, I still managed to get through it, but look how many skulls I got. This is Bush League. Level 5, and I gotta admit, the last 2 levels of this game are where it really starts to fall apart. It starts off promisingly enough with the police chasing us on our motorcycle because, well, I kill people, but it quickly goes downhill once we get to the level proper. The various breeds of thugs, goons, and brutes have been replaced by cops, sporting new equipment like hover bikes and flamethrowers. Funnily enough, that doesn't stop thugs from still showing up and firing at you alongside the cops. The police and criminal populations have come together to make a joint statement. Fuck this guy. The design of this section climbing up the stairs is obnoxious. Remember how Grave's 2 biggest weaknesses are his turning speed and inability to handle tight spaces? Well, the game seeks to exploit this by sticking you in super tight hallways and rounding tons of corners, always making sure to give the enemy first shot. Getting through there and we get a brand new section with a super low draw distance, meaning you can't actually see what's coming, including flamethrower enemies that do this to you. Hey, finally, I'm double dead! Words lack the ability to convey what sound I made when I saw my point total go from 3 million to 0. Your score doesn't mean anything, it's just there to let you think about how fun big numbers are, but hell if I'm gonna lose it! Luckily, restarting the stage lets you keep the score you had going in, which was a massive relief. No, small number bad, big number good! Running back through the stage, you start to notice more oddities, like how enemies are spread out in a way to make sure your combo stays low enough that you can't get any more demolition shots, including the one that restores health. Also, this stretch of the stage is just completely silent. They didn't put any music in it. I use my 1 demolition shot on the flamethrower guy because I don't tolerate bullying, and I get to an elevator. After testing in the last level to see how much side-to-side movement the game needed to still be fun, this level looks to check how much movement is needed, period. You just stand still and turn to whichever side a bad guy is on, shoot them dead, and then turn back around. The elevator handles the movement part. I still like this section though, it's got a nice shooting gallery feel to it. Getting past that and we get to the top of the building to a Japanese garden where the next Syndicate member is. He takes you on while hextuple wielding machine guns. He didn't hit me once. After we show him a thing or two, he blows on his thumb so hard that he puffs up like a balloon. Except his circulation kinda sucks, so he ends up looking like this. So this big body looks like it'd be perfect, just like the Bob fight was, pure bullet sponge. Not so, since most of the body is actually invincible, it's just that tiny head of his that can be damaged, and the only way to consistently hit it is to use the lock-on. A lock-on, though, is unreliable, seeing as the only way to stay locked on is if you hold down the button, and if he moves too far away, he'll break the lock-on. Then you have to spend the better part of an afternoon turning around to try to find him again. This is all in a fantasy world where the boss isn't actively trying to kill you. He'll throw helicopters, charge at you with his big fist, and worst of all, send out a shockwave. You need to know which attack is coming super early to dodge it, but the tell to know which move is coming is so quick that when he goes to throw it, you'll still be shooting. But then you get knocked around and lose points, and I don't care if they don't do anything, they make me feel good. At least the music in this fight is super fantastic, but you're not gonna get to hear it, because they use the same music in the anime as they used in the game, and that makes it so anytime I try to use music from the game in the video, it gets copyright struck. Doing enough damage, though, unlocks a grave shot, letting us stylishly take down an enemy as long as we have a demolition shot. And don't I go and pick the most underwhelming one to start with? Do you know how hard it is to find missiles? I've been refreshing Newegg for days and they're still not in stock. I have been advised under legal counsel to not discuss how many skulls I have. Stage 6 starts immediately after the last one as we meet up with the second to last syndicate member, our former friend and trainee, Bungie. You can tell he learned from us because he has his own grave chute, but I may have taught him a little too well because he can do his as many times as he wants. Bungie, baby, you only do it when they're near death, otherwise it's tacky. This fight rocks. It's the game's rival fight, so Bungie doesn't have many more tools than you have. Same pistol, same grave chute, no coffin, but I'll get him one soon. Bungie also has a gimmick where when he's dying, he'll run away to go regain health. What a yellow-bellied coward. Stand your ground and fight like a shields down, come on, regenerate already! Stand your ground and fight like a man. The key to this fight is to actually let him regain all the health that he wants, since the more times he does it, the less he regains each time, meaning eventually you'll whittle him down into grave shot range. He apologizes he couldn't return the favor for all we did for him and poofs away. It's a good thing he comes back in every other game in this series. As we ride the elevator up to the final boss, all is revealed as we learn Grave's real name used to be Brandon Heat, and he was best friends with Harry McDowell, the new syndicate head. They used to work alongside Big Daddy, who went about cleaning up the criminal underworld by becoming the head of the mob. Big Daddy's rule as head of the syndicate led to peace in the city, and he was even due to have a kid, Mika. Maria, Mika's mom, asks Brandon to look after Mika in case something happens to her and Big Daddy. Harry thinks something should happen to her and Big Daddy. Brandon refuses, and as a result is shot and killed by Harry, falling all the way back down to the slums and gutters of the city. Finally riding his way back up, Grave is ready to get revenge and stop the syndicate for good. Getting to the top of the building is surreal. For the entire rest of the game, you've been knee-deep in the grime of Cyber Chicago, and now you're high above the clouds on these otherworldly platforms with this unsettling and almost twisted music playing. I absolutely love the look of this last level. Seeing Grave against all these bright blue backgrounds makes him look so out of place, which is appropriate given how far he's come. On top of that, the enemies are swapped out for all new varieties, these unfinished looking angel creatures that shamble around, bodies haphazardly put together with swords and wings all over the place. The whole stage has this ethereal and unreal feeling that I adore. I love how different this stage looks from every other stage that came before it, completely throwing out the established visual style to make you feel as vulnerable and alone as Grave does. Oh, but they forgot to make it fun. The stage is crawling with a ton of flying enemies, which Grave has a lot of trouble handling. These big flesh sacks that endlessly spawn guys, they had a chance to create a whole new species and kept the rocket launcher guys for some reason. Enemies are a lot faster than you, usually being able to dash all around and defend against all your damage, and when all I can do is shoot gun and waddle from place to place, putting a cap on one of those really hampers the enjoyment. Also, the verticality of the stage means that there's a high likelihood that Grave will either fall off the edge or worse, get knocked off by an annoying enemy. This is another instance like the last stage as well, where enemies are spread out just enough that you can't ever build up a combo to get more demolition shots. You barely get any to work with, and when enemies are as tough as this, you're really gonna want a few. So we get to the top of the tower and Harry McDowell is waiting for us. He is still just a normal guy. Why does God need a trench coat? He reveals that he revived Big Daddy as a giant flesh golem ready to kill us, and oh, I do so wish the game would pick up the quality for the last boss. Big Daddy has about 3 attacks: breathing fire, shooting a Gatling gun, and slamming his fist down. The Gatling gun and fire are easy enough to avoid, but I straight up don't think you can dodge the slam attack. It comes out almost instantly, takes away your entire shield, and leaves you helpless. This is probably biblical what's happening right now. This leads us on to the final boss fight with Alien Head, who, of all things, is a new take on the excavator fight from level 3. You have to waddle away from the boss as he tries to bite you and launch his eyes like missiles. He can scream skulls at you, which is actually probably the most handy phase since at some rages he just can't hit you, but the game can seriously test your patience for how long you can go without recovering health. Yes, just like Polar Express on GameCube, this game has no health pickups. The only way to do so is by using a demolition shot, but that also permanently lowers your grade at the end of the stage if you do. After dealing enough damage though, you can finish him off with a grave shoot, which makes up for the fact that I missed every other one by making all 4 of them 1. My idiocy has finally been rewarded. After escaping the newly resurrected and now double dead Big Daddy, we have Harry to deal with, and the game does the best thing possible for a cutscene. Grave won't fire until you press the fire button. What a nice young man letting me be part of his revenge. With Harry dead and the remaining Syndicate members even deader, Light returns to the city for the first time as Grave takes Mika far, far away so she can hopefully live a normal life. I can't lie, Gungrave is an almost insultingly simple game. You have to put maybe 2 brain cells to work while playing this game, and even then, you can probably give one the day off. You stand still, you shoot, you win. It's like that from the beginning of the game to the end, with no variation at any point. If this game doesn't hook you in the opening stage, it never will. If you're like me though, you'll be hooked for the entire game. That entire game, by the way, is a mere hour and 56 minutes. This game is incredibly short, and honestly, it's better off for it. This game does not have the depth to keep someone hooked for more than what there is. If there was another level after this video would be spoken in a radically different tone. Gungrave's short length ties all the way back to the point I made about how to the point this game is. It's the perfect length for a send-up to classic arcade shooting galleries, and is part of the reason I have no interest in playing its sequel Overdose or the new game Gore. Trust me, I wanted to play the game with Rockabilly Red Cadillac real badly. Meet his brother, Hounddong Bass Pro. 10 hours of Gungrave is way too much Gungrave, and I feel like people will have played those 2 much more readily available games and have a negative outlook on the original because of it. I'll say it like this, I want to play 1 hour of Gungrave a year. Gungrave is the port of an arcade game that never existed, and I can wholeheartedly say that it is amazing. Hey, I'm Officer Jack with 2 X's and a Z. I've been asked to speak here on piracy prevention. I know some of you think it's pretty cool how your computer can run any PS2 game in the world whenever you want for free, but it's not cool and it's not glamorous. What is cool and is glamorous though is paying $80 for a copy of Gungrave off eBay, which, need I remind you, is an hour-and-a-half game. A game that has seen no new way to purchase it in well over 2 decades, no digital redistribution, no chance to even support the original developers, who are dead by the way. Hey, come on, if you can't support Red Entertainment or Sega, why not support your local Luke from Milwaukee? Emulating games isn't cool unless a company does it to sell you a game from 1994 for $30. Yoo-hoo boys, I'm gullible and bad with money!